Mila Rivera stood at her floor-to-ceiling window in her Naples apartment watching the Florida sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. At 20, she had already achieved what many of her peers were still dreaming about: a prestigious position at one of Florida's most luxurious resorts and a chic apartment with water views. As she traced her reflection in the glass, she couldn't help but marvel at how far she'd come from her modest origins. Born to middle-class parents in the San Fernando Valley, Mila had always been marked by an insatiable ambition. Her father, a high school Spanish teacher, and her mother, a dental receptionist, had instilled in her the value of education and hard work throughout her childhood. Mila had watched her parents scrimp and save, taking extra shifts to ensure she could attend the best schools. Their sacrifice had paid off when she earned a partial scholarship to Gulf Coast State College in Florida. In college, Mila had distinguished herself not just through her academic excellence but through her innovative approach to hospitality management. Her thesis on luxury tourism in the digital age had caught the attention of several local businesses. When the offer came from Naples' Grande Beach Resort, Mila knew it was her chance to break into the upper echelons of the industry. The transition to Naples in early 2018 had been both exhilarating and overwhelming. The city's palm-lined streets and endless opportunities seemed to perfectly align with her ambitions. Within her first 3 months at the resort, Mila had already made a name for herself by successfully securing several large event bookings through her charm and meticulous attention to detail. Her apartment, though modest by Naples standards, felt like a palace compared to her shared bedroom in California. The resort had arranged for her accommodation in a stylish mid-rise with views of the bay, a far cry from her childhood home in the valley. Mila had quickly adapted to the Florida lifestyle, joining various professional networking groups and making friends with other young professionals from around the state. Ashley Williams, a nursing student who worked part-time at a nearby clinic, had become her closest friend and roommate. "You have to understand," Ashley had told her over coffee at their favorite beachside cafe, "Naples operates on a different frequency. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you know." Mila took this advice to heart, accepting every invitation to networking events and social opportunities. Her natural charm and intelligence made her a welcome addition to the local scene. She learned to navigate the delicate balance between professional ambition and genuine connection, always ensuring her attire and behavior were appropriate for each occasion. It was at her grandmother Elena's funeral in September 2018 that Mila's life took its fateful turn. The event was being held at Naples Memorial Gardens, and Mila had spent extra time preparing, knowing many of her grandmother's friends from the country club would be in attendance. As she stood in the receiving line, graciously accepting condolences from a blur of unfamiliar faces, she noticed one particular attendee paying close attention. Dominic Keller, a prominent 52-year-old business figure known for his real estate developments along the Gulf Coast, stood tall in an impeccably tailored navy suit. His salt-and-pepper hair and confident posture emanated success. After her presentation of thanks to the gathered mourners, Dominic approached her. "Miss Rivera," he said, his voice deep and assured. "Your grandmother spoke of you often during our charity board meetings. Elena was quite proud of your accomplishments." His presence was commanding, dressed in an immaculate suit, his silver-streaked hair perfectly styled. Mila felt a flutter of professional curiosity at the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Keller. I wasn't aware my grandmother had such distinguished friends," she replied, surprised at her own composure. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on her grandmother's community involvement and Mila's career aspirations. That initial meeting led to a connection on social media that evening, when Mila, seeking distraction from grief, found Dominic's profile and sent a simple message thanking him again for his kind words. She hadn't expected a response, certainly not within the hour. Elena's legacy deserves recognition. If you'd ever like to hear more about her impact on our community, I'd be happy to share over coffee sometime. Ashley noticed the change in Mila almost immediately. The phone that had once been casually checked now commanded her roommate's constant attention. "Who's got you smiling at your phone like that?" Ashley asked one evening, peering over the kitchen counter as Mila rapidly typed a response to yet another message. "Just someone who knew my grandmother," Mila replied, her casual tone betrayed by the flush creeping up her neck. Over the next 2 weeks, Their messages evolved from respectful exchanges about her grandmother to discussions about Naples' development and Mila's career aspirations. Each notification brought a rush of anticipation. Meanwhile, across town in his waterfront mansion, Dominic Keller lived a life Mila could only imagine. His real estate development company had transformed the Naples shoreline over 2 decades, earning him both fortune and influence. His marriage to Patricia, a prominent philanthropist, had produced 2 children now attending prestigious universities. Their social calendar was filled with charity galas and exclusive club events, their vacations spent on their yacht or at their mountain home in Colorado. When Dominic suggested meeting for coffee at an upscale cafe near Mila's campus, she spent hours selecting the perfect outfit. Professional but flattering, ambitious but not obvious. She told herself this was networking, mentorship, a connection to her grandmother's memory. But as she applied her makeup with unusual care that morning, even Mila couldn't deny the thrill of anticipation that had little to do with professional advancement. The first meeting was innocent enough, a comfortable corner table, discussions of architecture and community planning, Dominic offering advice on navigating Naples' professional landscape. Yet beneath the surface of their conversation ran currents neither acknowledged. His lingering glances, her attentive laughter, the way their hands briefly touched when reaching for the check. The second coffee meeting led to a third, then dinner at a discreet restaurant on the outskirts of Naples where Dominic claimed the chef prepared the best seafood in Florida. Mila noticed how he selected a corner table, partially hidden by an ornamental palm. She also noticed how he removed his wedding band, slipping it into his jacket pocket before reaching for his water glass. The gesture, smooth and practiced, told her everything about his intentions without a single word being exchanged. October brought a transformation in their relationship. What had begun as mentorship quickly evolved into something neither openly acknowledged. Dominic's text messages arrived at predictable intervals, early mornings before his wife awoke, lunch breaks when he could step away from the office, late evenings when Patricia attended her various committee meetings. Mila began to structure her days around these communications, checking her phone obsessively during shifts at the resort, disappointing friends when she cancelled plans at the first hint of Dominic's availability. Their meetings moved from public cafes to more secluded venues. First, it was lunch aboard his 48-foot yacht, the Patricia, docked at Naples Marina. Mila felt a peculiar thrill seeing the vessel named after his wife while she sipped champagne in its elegant cabin. Dominic explained his business empire with expansive gestures, pointing out properties he'd developed along the shoreline. His hand occasionally brushed against hers, each touch lingering slightly longer than propriety allowed. She pretended not to notice, but catalogued every contact, replaying them later in her apartment when sleep wouldn't come. By November, Dominic had introduced Mila to a different Naples, one of exclusive membership clubs with discreet staff who never questioned his female companion, upscale restaurants with private dining rooms, and finally, to the waterfront condominium he maintained separately from his family home. The latter he described as an investment property, though the minimal furnishings and well-stocked bar suggested its true purpose. The first time he brought her there, Mila recognized the calculated risk she was taking, yet the allure of Dominic's world, his power, his attention, his apparent fascination with her, overwhelmed any hesitation. Throughout these encounters, Dominic maintained the fiction of mentorship, discussing Mila's career prospects even as his intentions became increasingly transparent. The pretense provided both with plausible deniability, a veneer of professionalism that grew thinner with each meeting. When their relationship finally crossed the physical boundary, in the master bedroom of his condo overlooking the Gulf, it seemed to Mila an inevitable conclusion rather than a conscious choice. Meanwhile, Patricia Keller, Dominic's wife of 25 years, remained focused on her role as one of Naples' premier socialites. Her calendar overflowed with charity luncheons, committee meetings, and fundraising galas. Photographs of these events appeared regularly in local publications, showing Patricia immaculately dressed, always smiling, often with a politely distant Dominic at her side. Mila began collecting these images, studying the woman whose husband now shared her bed, searching for flaws in the perfect facade. When Patricia launched a new community garden initiative, Mila attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, watching from a distance as Dominic performed his duties as supportive spouse, feeling a twisted satisfaction at knowing what Patricia did not. For Dominic, the affair provided an escape from a marriage that had cooled into comfortable routine. While he maintained genuine respect for Patricia and her social achievements, their relationship had long ago surrendered passion to practicality. Mila's youth, her unconcealed admiration, her eager responsiveness to his desires, these offered renewal to a man approaching his 50s with the first intimations of mortality. He enjoyed her company without guilt, compartmentalizing this aspect of his life as he did his various business ventures. In private moments of honesty, he recognized the relationship's inevitable conclusion, but such moments were easily deferred in favor of present pleasures. Mila's feelings evolved along a dramatically different trajectory. What began as ambition tinged with attraction rapidly intensified into obsession. She began researching Dominic's schedule, learning which board meetings he attended, which properties he was developing, which social events required his presence. She drove past his office building during lunch breaks, hoping for a glimpse of him entering or leaving. Her internet browser history filled with searches of his name, his company, his real estate developments. She studied photographs of his family home, imagining herself replacing Patricia in that carefully curated space. Her roommate Ashley observed these changes with mounting concern. Mila's previously reliable work ethic deteriorated as she called in sick to accommodate Dominic's schedule. Her class attendance became sporadic, assignments submitted late or incomplete. The vibrant social life she had cultivated during her first months in Naples contracted dramatically, friends and activities discarded in favor of waiting by her phone. Ashley's gentle questions about the mysterious older man were deflected with increasingly implausible explanations about networking opportunities and career mentorship. December marked an escalation in Dominic's attentions. Expensive gifts began appearing, a designer handbag left casually on his condo's bed, a pair of sapphire earrings to match her eyes, a resort weekend in Key West explained to Patricia as a developers conference. Each gift further convinced Mila of her special place in Dominic's life, each luxury experience reinforcing her belief that she belonged in his world permanently. She began mentally redecorating his family home, imagining holidays with his adult children, planning the renovations she would make once Patricia was gone. In her more lucid moments, usually in the pre-dawn hours when Dominic had returned to his marital bed, Mila recognized the delusion in these fantasies. Yet by morning, rationality surrendered again to the intoxication of possibility. She began leaving personal items at his condo, a toothbrush, favorite shampoo, eventually clothing, small claims on territory she increasingly viewed as rightfully hers. When Dominic mentioned Patricia's annual January trip to visit her sister in Chicago, Mila began planning for their first uninterrupted days together. In her mind, this would be the proving ground, the time when Dominic would recognize that Mila could provide everything Patricia did and more. She purchased lingerie she couldn't afford, researched recipes for his favorite meals, practiced the polite social conversation that seemed to come so naturally to Patricia. The fantasy sustained her through the Christmas season, when Dominic's family obligations limited their time together to hurried encounters at the condo between holiday events. Dominic, meanwhile, viewed the approaching January interlude with less transformative expectations. Patricia's annual absence offered a welcome opportunity for extended time with Mila without the usual constraints of schedule and secrecy. He saw it as a pleasant interlude in an affair that, while satisfying, remained distinctly separate from his real life. The gifts he bestowed, the experiences he provided, represented not a pathway to permanence but appreciation for temporary pleasure. In the compartmentalized architecture of his morality, such generosity absolved the underlying betrayal. As December drew to a close, the divergence between their perceptions of the relationship widened into an unbridgeable chasm, though neither yet recognized the danger in this disparity. Mila, now thoroughly convinced of her rightful place in Dominic's future, began subtly pressing for acknowledgement of their relationship's permanence. Dominic, equally committed to its temporary nature, deflected these suggestions with practiced ease, offering instead immediate pleasures that temporarily satisfied Mila's deeper hunger for security. The foundation was thus laid for inevitable collapse, two incompatible realities existing simultaneously until circumstance would force their violent reconciliation. Patricia Keller sat at her polished mahogany vanity, methodically applying her evening makeup before another charity function. Outside their waterfront mansion's windows, the January sun was setting over the Gulf of Mexico. She reached for her phone to check the time, noticing something unusual, a text message notification from an unknown number. Normally, she would ignore such messages, but the preview caught her attention. Ask your husband about his waitress. The message contained a photo attachment. Patricia's manicured finger hovered over it momentarily before tapping to open it. The image showed Dominic in a restaurant she didn't recognize, his hand covering Mila's on the table, their posture intimate and unmistakable. Unlike the countless business dinners she'd grown accustomed to ignoring, this photograph radiated something different, something personal. For several minutes, Patricia sat motionless, the gold-framed mirror reflecting a woman whose carefully constructed world had just shifted beneath her feet. 25 years of marriage had taught her to recognize Dominic's patterns. The late meetings, the weekend property inspections, the business trips that seemed to multiply, all signs she had deliberately ignored, preferring the security of willful blindness to the chaos of confrontation. Across town in his private office, Dominic was reviewing architectural plans for a new waterfront development. The past 6 weeks with Mila had provided an exhilarating diversion from the predictable rhythm of his life. Her youth, her eagerness to please, her unabashed admiration, all fed a part of him that Patricia's polite companionship had long ceased to nourish. Still, as January progressed, subtle warning signs had begun to emerge. Mila's texts had grown more frequent, more demanding of his attention. She'd begun asking questions about his marriage, about Patricia, about his long-term plans. Questions that crossed the unspoken boundaries he maintained around his affairs. Just yesterday, she'd left a drawer of her clothing at the condo without asking permission. A small but significant claim on territory he considered temporarily shared rather than permanently transferred. When his office phone rang, displaying his home number, Dominic answered with practiced casualness. Patricia's voice, unusually controlled, informed him she would not be attending the Conservancy Gala that evening. Instead, she expected him home for a discussion about their marriage. Before he could formulate a response, she had ended the call. In her apartment, Mila was selecting an outfit for her evening with Dominic. With Patricia attending the gala, they had planned dinner at his condo, another opportunity for Mila to demonstrate how perfectly she could fit into his life. She had prepared his favorite meal, selected music he preferred, even purchased the specific scotch he enjoyed after dinner. Each detail was designed to contrast her passionate attention against what she imagined as Patricia's cold efficiency. Mila's phone remained silent throughout her preparations. By 7 o'clock, an hour past their usual meeting time, the carefully prepared meal had cooled on the dining table. By 8, her calls to Dominic went straight to voicemail. By 9, anxiety had transmuted into a sharp-edged suspicion that something was interfering with the narrative she had so carefully constructed. The confrontation at the Keller mansion unfolded with glacial control. Patricia, presenting the photographic evidence without melodrama, watched as Dominic cycled through familiar stages: denial, minimization, rationalization, before arriving at strategic contrition. His affair with Mila, he assured his wife, was meaningless, a temporary diversion without emotional significance. Patricia listened, her expression unchanged, before presenting her terms. End the relationship immediately, commit to marriage counseling, and transfer a significant portion of assets into her name as both insurance and penance. Dominic, calculating the financial implications of divorce against the cost of Patricia's demands, agreed with reluctance disguised as remorse. His marriage, despite its emotional limitations, remained an essential component of his carefully structured life, a partnership that provided social credibility, practical support, and financial stability. Mila, despite her intoxicating youth, offered none of these permanent advantages. The decision made, Dominic retreated to his study, composing and deleting multiple text messages to Mila before settling on brevity. Need to meet tomorrow. Development property on Bayshore. 10 a.m. He would end things cleanly, perhaps provide a generous financial gift to ease the transition. The matter would be resolved by noon, his life recalibrated by evening. Mila, receiving this message after hours of anguished waiting, interpreted it through the lens of her deepest desires. Clearly, Dominic was planning to discuss their future, perhaps even arrangements for her to move into the condo permanently while he finalized his separation from Patricia. The waterfront development property, one of his most prestigious projects, seemed the perfect location for such a significant conversation. That night, while Patricia slept in the guest bedroom of their mansion, Dominic lay awake calculating the most efficient way to extract himself from a relationship that had exceeded its intended boundaries. Across town, Mila also remained awake, mentally selecting items from her apartment that would accompany her to what she imagined as the first phase of her new life with Dominic. Morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the Florida winter delivering one of those impossibly perfect days that had first attracted Dominic to Naples decades earlier. He arrived at the development property 30 minutes early, using the time to inspect construction progress while rehearsing phrases designed to terminate the relationship with minimal drama. The waterfront property, a luxury condominium complex under construction, offered both privacy and symbolic significance. The half-completed building represented Dominic's vision for the future, a vision that, in his mind, had never included Mila beyond temporary diversion. The top-floor office space, framed but not yet finished, provided views across the bay while remaining shielded from workers on the lower floors. Mila arrived precisely at 10, having taken exceptional care with her appearance. She had selected a dress that suggested professional sophistication rather than romantic intention, calculating that their new beginning required her to project maturity rather than youthful allure. The security guard, recognizing her from previous visits with Dominic, directed her to the service elevator that would take her to the top floor. As the elevator ascended, Mila mentally rehearsed her own carefully prepared phrases: acceptance of his inevitable divorce announcement, practical suggestions for their transition period, assurances of her discretion during legal proceedings. The doors opened to reveal Dominic standing at the wall of windows, his posture rigid, his expression obscured as he looked out toward the water. Neither could have anticipated how dramatically their carefully constructed scripts would diverge, nor how catastrophically their conflicting expectations would collide in the unfinished space overlooking the indifferent Gulf waters. The glass paperweight sat on the temporary desk, a promotional item bearing the development's logo, its substantial weight designed to hold architectural plans in place against the persistent coastal breeze. Within moments, it would become an instrument of irreversible change, transforming two disparate fantasies into one shocking reality. Mila's hands trembled as she rode the service elevator down to the ground floor. Inside her purse lay Dominic's wallet, his Rolex watch, and his wedding ring, the last removed from his lifeless finger with a strange blend of reverence and rage. The paperweight that had struck his temple with such devastating effect remained upstairs, her fingerprints embedded in the glass alongside specks of Dominic's blood and hair. The security guard nodded as she passed, noting nothing unusual beyond her pallor, which she masked with sunglasses and a brief mention of a sudden migraine. Her car, parked where security cameras wouldn't capture a clear image, a precaution Dominic himself had once explained while discussing the property's eventual surveillance system, started on the first try despite her shaking key hand. The January afternoon stretched before her with horrifying emptiness. She needed normality, witnesses who would remember her doing ordinary things during these critical hours. At Publix, she methodically selected groceries, making small talk with a cashier about an upcoming storm. She texted Ashley about picking up dinner, mentioned a fictional work meeting running late. Each action deliberate, each word carefully chosen to construct the armor of routine against the extraordinary event she had just experienced. Inside her apartment, she scrubbed her hands until they were raw, changed clothes twice, then systematically cleaned her car interior. Dominic's personal items she stored in the back of her closet, unable to discard them but unwilling to examine them closely. All except the wedding ring, which she kept in her jewelry box, occasionally removing it to feel its weight in her palm, the tangible evidence of a relationship that had existed beyond her delusions. The following morning dawned with deceptive normalcy. Mila prepared for her shift at the resort, selected an appropriate outfit, applied makeup to conceal her sleepless night. It was only when she checked her phone that reality intruded. 3 missed calls from the resort's management office. Turning on the local news, she felt her carefully constructed world collapse. Dominic Keller's body had been discovered by the morning security shift during their routine check of the property. Initial reports called it a tragic accident, but by noon, the language had shifted to suspicious circumstances, and by evening, to homicide investigation. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office had assigned Detective Eliza Vasquez to the case, a veteran investigator with a reputation for methodical thoroughness. Mila moved through the following days in a fugue state, reporting to work, attending classes, responding to texts, all while monitoring news coverage with obsessive attention. Each development brought fresh terror, security footage being collected from surrounding buildings, witnesses being interviewed, Dominic's business associates questioned about recent conflicts. Detective Vasquez built her case with the patience of an architect. The security footage showing Mila entering and leaving the building provided timeline bookends. Cell tower data placed her phone at the scene. Background interviews revealed the connection that began at Mila Rivera's funeral. Digital forensics uncovered months of messages between victim and suspect. Piece by piece, motive and opportunity aligned with physical evidence. Patricia Keller, navigating the complex terrain between public grieving widow and privately betrayed spouse, provided investigators with the anonymous text message and photograph she had received. Her account of the confrontation the night before Dominic's death established the catalyst for the fatal meeting. It was Ashley who finally contacted authorities, her concern for her roommate transforming into fear as she observed Mila's erratic behavior following Dominic's death. The late-night crying, the obsessive news watching, the mysterious absences from their apartment, all painted a picture of involvement rather than mere grief. When she discovered Dominic's wedding ring hidden in Mila's jewelry box, her suspicions crystallized into certainty. The arrest warrant was issued 10 days after Dominic's death. Mila, returning from her shift at the resort, found Detective Vasquez waiting in the apartment parking lot, flanked by uniformed officers. As handcuffs closed around her wrists, Mila experienced a moment of bizarre clarity, understanding fully, perhaps for the first time, how completely the narrative she had constructed had diverged from reality. Naples society, initially shocked by Dominic's death, found itself scandalized anew by the circumstances. The respected developer, the ambitious young waitress, the confrontation in an unfinished luxury property, each element more sensational than the last. Media coverage exploded beyond local outlets to national news programs, each iteration embellishing the story's already dramatic contours. In her holding cell, Mila finally confronted the unbridgeable gap between her fantasies and the harsh reality she now faced. The imagined future with Dominic had been entirely her own construction, built from fragments of attention and temporary pleasure he had offered without commitment. The paperweight, the fatal blow, the flight from the scene. These were now the defining moments of her life, not the romantic delusions she had so carefully nurtured. Patricia Keller, standing in her immaculate home's garden the evening of Mila's arrest, received the news with complicated emotions. Justice for Dominic seemed a hollow victory against the backdrop of their marriage's revealed fractures. The careful social architecture she had maintained lay partially collapsed, requiring reconstruction around truths she had long chosen to ignore. The police search of Mila's apartment yielded a trove of damning evidence. Dominic's wallet and Rolex hidden in a showbox, the wedding ring in her jewelry case, and a journal documenting their relationship with disturbing detail. Forensics found traces of his blood on shoes she had attempted to clean. Her phone contained hundreds of messages, many unanswered, sent in the hours after his death, digital footprints of panic and attempted cover-up. In the Naples County Detention Center, Mila sat across from investigators, her earlier composure shattered by the reality of incarceration. The interrogation room's stark lighting emphasized the dark circles beneath her eyes, the bitten fingernails, the tremor in her hands. Detective Vasquez, observing these physical manifestations of psychological collapse, built her timeline methodically: the funeral meeting, escalating relationship, Patricia's discovery, the fatal confrontation. Each question designed not to elicit confession but to eliminate alternative explanations. Local media dubbed the case funeral to fatal attraction, the salacious details driving coverage across Florida. National tabloid shows sent correspondents to Naples, their cameras capturing the contrast between luxury resorts and the county jail where Mila awaited arraignment. Patricia Keller, initially shielded by family concerns, became an object of simultaneous sympathy and speculation. Had she known? Had she enabled? The questions circulated through Naples society with the speed and destructiveness of a summer hurricane. The psychological evaluation ordered by the court described Mila as suffering from dependent personality traits with obsessive features exacerbated by environmental stresses. The clinical language barely contained the narrative of a young woman whose ordinary ambitions had mutated into fatal delusion. The report noted her continued belief, despite all evidence, that Dominic had genuinely cared for her, a cognitive distortion that persisted even as she acknowledged striking him with the paperweight. In the crowded courtroom, Mila's parents sat directly behind their daughter, their expressions reflecting bewildered devastation. Carlos Rivera, the high school Spanish teacher who had worked extra shifts to fund his daughter's education, and Maria, the dental receptionist who had instilled in Mila the ambition that had ultimately consumed her, struggled to reconcile the child they had raised with the defendant before them. Their modest values, their emphasis on hard work and integrity, seemed to have dissolved in the intoxicating atmosphere of wealth and status that Naples embodied. Patricia Keller attended each preliminary hearing, her presence a silent testimony that demanded accountability. Her gaze, when it fell on Mila, contained neither hatred nor forgiveness but something more complex, recognition of another woman who had, in vastly different ways, built her life around Dominic's gravitational pull. The gallery, filled with Naples society figures and media representatives, buzzed with speculation about whether she would speak at sentencing. The prosecution, armed with overwhelming physical evidence and digital records, sought second-degree murder charges. Mila's public defender argued for voluntary manslaughter, positioning the crime as a spontaneous reaction to emotional provocation. The distinction represented years of additional imprisonment. Behind closed doors, plea negotiations centered on this critical differentiation of intent versus impulse, premeditation versus passion. Naples reacted to the scandal with performative shock that barely concealed collective fascination. At country club luncheons and beach resort bars, conversations dissected every detail of the case, each revelation affirming the community's belief in its own superior judgment while feeding its appetite for others' transgressions. The case became a cautionary tale, a morality play about ambition unmoored from ethics, desire divorced from reality. In her cell, during the long nights between court appearances, Mila traced the trajectory from funeral to fatal confrontation with obsessive precision. Each decision, each self-deception, each moment she had interpreted Dominic's attention as genuine feeling rather than convenient exploitation, all scrutinized with the desperate clarity of hindsight. The narrative she constructed now was no longer one of romantic possibility but of inexorable destruction. The sentencing hearing, 12 months after Dominic's death, concluded with Mila receiving 18 years in Florida State Prison. Her statement to the court acknowledged responsibility while revealing the persistent duality of her perspective, genuine remorse entangled with lingering belief that her relationship with Dominic had contained authentic meaning beyond exploitation and fantasy. 1 year later, Patricia Keller stood at the dedication of the Dominic Keller Memorial Park, a waterfront green space developed from the property where he had died. The project, which she had guided through approval and construction, represented both memorial and reclamation, transforming a site of personal tragedy into community resource. Her speech, brief and measured, emphasized renewal without directly addressing the circumstances of her husband's death. Detective Vasquez, attending the dedication in civilian clothes, observed Patricia with professional admiration and personal respect. In her 20 years with the department, the Keller case remained distinctive not for its complexity but for its stark illustration of how prosperity and privilege offered no immunity against the consequences of deception, both self-deception and the deliberate kind that corrodes relationships from within. As Naples continued its endless cycle of growth and reinvention, the story of Mila Rivera and Dominic Keller gradually transformed from immediate scandal to local legend, a modern cautionary tale about fatal attraction beginning with a chance encounter at a grandmother's funeral, ending in a prison cell, with 18 years to contemplate how completely a single obsession can consume a promising life.